Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Lunar Temple Podcast. So, we are going to be celebrating together in this podcast all things Spring Equinox and Aries season, Astrological New Year, and New Moon in Aries. So, we have a lot of really forward moving energy to work with this week, which feels to me like a really welcome energy to be working with. So today I'm speaking to you on Monday, the 20th of March, which is the day of both the spring equinox and the day that the sun moves into Aries, initiating Aries season. So in terms of the wheel of the year, this is the second of the spring festivals. So it can be a little bit confusing with matching up the wheel of the year to other interpretations of spring, because we will see a lot of people referring to today as the official start to spring, which for many people, it really feels that way when you get to the spring equinox, because we have that equal day and night, and then of course the days are going to begin to become longer, and we really feel that shift into the spring. But in terms of the Celtic wheel of the year, there are three spring festivals, the first being Imbolc in February, second spring equinox, and the third Beltane Bealtaine, which is on the 1st of May. So this really, when you're looking at the wheel, is what I like to refer to as established spring. That feels a really good term for me, because Imbolc is obviously holding two energies. It is the end of winter and the beginning of spring. And then Beltane Bealtaine is actually also, as well as spring, it is the start of summer as well. So those cross-quarter festivals are always the in-betweens and the liminal spaces holding the energy of two seasons. And then when we get to the equinoxes and the solstices, they are holding an established season. Yeah. So just to make it more confusing, Aries new moon, which is tomorrow, is the astrological new year. Yeah, so we've had lots of New Years, haven't we, already, as we have been discussing through this podcast series. So we have calendar New Year, January 1st. Some people take the winter solstice before that as their New Year. Some people treat Samhain as the New Year. It's often referred to as the Witch's New Year. Some people think of Imbolc as the New Year, the first signs of spring. We have Lunar New Year, Chinese New Year, and then we have Astrological New Year, which is when Aries season begins, or when new moon in Aries. And the reason for that is the zodiac cycle begins with Aries and ends with Pisces. So the way that I view this, and I think I've talked about this before, is it's just layers and spirals to this energy of awakening and waxing. So I don't have a particular one New Year. I have this feeling of awakening and unfurling and slowly rising as I make my way towards the spring and the summer. And what I have found over the years is this takes the pressure off a particular date or time as needing to be really positive, or needing to feel like I know where I'm going or what I'm doing and where I'm headed. And it's really nice to work in this layered approach, because if you get to, for example, calendar New Year with January 1st and you've got no idea what you want to welcome in, you can think that's okay. Maybe there's a couple of things to think about here and a couple of intentions to set, and then I'm going to layer that again at Imbolc. I'm going to layer that again when I get to the spring equinox, and so forth. So that's what I really like about the wheel of the year anyway. You have these 8 moments, these 8 points throughout the year when you can pause, take a breath, think about where you're at right now in your life and what you would like to welcome in. And in this busy world, we need these reminders to slow down and to come back to self and center, and really check in with our needs and our goals and our wishes. So the other way that I like to think about spring equinox is nature's new year. Yeah, and I really feel that this year when we are out in our garden, there's lots of exciting green shoots and some flowers actually appearing, and things that I wasn't sure had survived through winter. We've had some really extreme weather over here in the UK, and there are a lot of things that haven't made it. But it's been a nice surprise to see the things that have and are starting to return. And that's a really nice inward reflection here also at this time of year, to just think, what are the things that haven't made it through the winter? What am I really wanting to let go of and release? The things perhaps no longer meant for us, that don't fit anymore. And what are the things from last year that have survived and thrived and are ready to bloom and awaken once again? So in Maya Toll's beautiful book and accompanying oracle deck, the Wild Wisdom Companion, she has this beautiful spread all about the spring equinox. For those of you watching on YouTube, this is the beautiful illustration of unfurling, so a seed sprouting and the sun beaming down. And I wanted to just read a little bit from this section. So many times upon a time, there was an oak tree. This particular oak tree grew at the wood's edge, in easy reach of the fields beyond. Each year, as autumn came to a close, the tree would throw its acorns towards the sunlit meadow. Each spring, tiny, perfect, miniature oak trees would rise from the soil and begin to unfurl their leaves. As the years went on, the forest expanded, oak tree by oak tree, each tree stretching towards the next open patch of sky. During the time of unfurling, when the days begin to stretch longer and all of nature is yearning toward the sun, inhale the world around you. Feel your lungs and your rib cage expand as you suck in the sense of spring. Allow the energy of the season to awaken your own energy, to encourage an expansive dream or a creative quest. This is the time of year to set intentions for your own growth. Pause in the hustle and bustle of daily life and tune in to your heart. Breathe into these questions. If you want to take a moment, if you've got the chance to close your eyes, maybe rest a hand to your heart and breathe deeply. What do you want? What do you want to be? How do you want to show up for yourself and others? And then she recommends writing these down. Write down your intentions, desires, and dreams for this growing season. Okay, so yeah, really, if you really enjoy working with the seasons, cyclical living, the wheel of the year, this book and the oracle deck are really beautiful to work with. And what I like about this book as well is it's very accessible. So if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, then you can use this really easily, because she doesn't necessarily attach them to the the kind of Celtic representation of the wheel of the year or the Wiccan wheel of the year. So she doesn't use those words. She just uses like early winter, winter solstice, late winter, for example. And so I feel that this just opens it up more for everybody. So yeah, it's very much recommended. The other couple of books, just while I'm on books, is so Spring in Your Step by Gillian Monks. So those of you that are fans of Merry Midwinter by the same author, she released this a couple of years ago. So it picks up where midwinter leaves. So it guides you through how to celebrate spring, but not just the spring equinox, kind of all those moments from Imbolc onwards. So I really, really recommend this. It's a really lovely, uplifting book. And the other one for working with the Wheel of the Year is The Magical Year by Dani Forrest. And so she gives rituals, recipes, meditations for each of the Wheel of the Year celebrations. And it's a really, really lovely book. So yeah, if you don't have that one, I would recommend it. And then this one, so you know that I read from these quite often. I've got the set of these. So Spring, an Anthology for the Changing Seasons. And this is edited by Melissa Harrison, but is a collection of lots of different writings. I want to read you a little bit from this. So this is from page 114. Spring is all about change. It takes the monochrome canvas of the winter world and paints it into summer in spectacular fashion. Life flushes forth from the earth in an exhilarating show of strength, although the claws of winter can often be felt long after we thought it gone. This yearly renewal moves gradually across the country with tiny steps. The first primroses peek out from between the rocks. Then the blackthorn blooms, then swallows sweep over the cliffs, and the days slowly lengthen. So I really love that description. And if you could pick out a few words, or if I could pick out a few words for this time of year, for really celebrating the spring equinox, then renewal would be one of those words. Rebirth is another one. Awakening, new beginnings. And you think of all the imagery that is associated with this time of year that has become synonymous now, hasn't it, with the celebration of Easter. It's all kind of wrapped up into one, but of course they are separate. But the imagery of the hares and the bunnies and the eggs, you know, the egg is such a symbol of new life and rebirth. And all of this imagery that is around at this time of year is really powerful for us to connect with. So really thinking about what is rebirthing within you. What do you want to really let go of and step away from as you move forward? One of the other images from the Wild Wisdom Companion that she gives for working with spring energy is this doorway. And I find that really, really powerful, thinking about the spring equinox as a portal, as a threshold. And it really is that time to now step forward into that maiden energy of spring. So this is the archetype that is so often associated with this time of year. And when we look at folklore around the spring, and particularly the spring equinox, we find this in so many of the stories. We've talked often in this podcast about Bridget and her defeating the Caliac. So the 25th of March, which is coming up, is celebrated as the Caliac's Day or Ladies' Day. And as well as this being a Christian celebration, this used to be a celebration of the final day of the Caliac's rule. So she would sort of submit defeat after putting up a really hefty fight in March. And you may have noticed over here in the UK, the weather has been really intense in March. And this is really, really fascinating when you look at the folklore around the Caliac. In the story of the Caliac, her son Angus and him falling in love with Bridget, who she has captured at Samhain. So he falls in love with Bridget, and he falls in love with her via seeing her in a dream. And he asks who this woman is that he keeps dreaming about. And he's told it's Bridget or bride. And he borrows, so thinking of Samhain as winter, he borrows 3 spring days so that he can go and visit Bridget. And when you look at the weather in November, there are these 3 days, 2 or 3 days of almost summery weather. It's really, really interesting. I can't remember the dates, so forgive me on that one. But when it gets to this time of year, the Caliac borrows those days back, and you get these 3 winter days in spring. And I found this so magical. Was it last week when we had the snow? I think it was last week or the week before. We had 3 days of snow. And so I thought, oh yeah, these are those borrowed days. So it's just really interesting. It's a really magical way to look at the world and not be so annoyed when you've got random days of snow in what you thought was spring. Then come the storms. So the Caliac's really putting up a fight to not relinquish the winter. So you get the storms, and we've had those, the winds, the strong, intense rain. And then finally, on the 25th, she submits defeat. She's tired. She's tired of the fight. She's tired. And it depends on the story that you read. Sometimes she just goes to sleep. Sometimes she retreats back into the land and the landscape. Other times she's described as drinking from the well of youth, and then she herself actually transforms into maiden. So that I just find that very, very interesting for this time of year. So we have that maiden and crone battling out at this time of year. So the Pisces energy and the Aries energy. And then, of course, this time of year is also in Greek mythology is really, really linked to Persephone's return from the underworld. So she has been spending the last 6 months in the underworld, learning all that she can learn from her mentor, Hecate, queen of the witches. So studying the mysteries, honoring the dark, honoring the waning time. And then she rises, she returns at this time of year from the underworld where she has been queen, and she returns in her aspect as maiden, as Kore, and is reunited, of course, with her mother Demeter. And this can't say the word now, reunion. This reunion, I was going to say reunization or something like this. This reunion between Persephone and Demeter, of course, turns the wheel and a new growth appears. So there's lots of really beautiful imagery in that story of life returning and Demeter's joy at being reunited with her daughter. And this is a powerful story to connect with in our life, because as we are connecting to the maiden of spring and welcoming her into our life, we want to make sure that we are integrating our crone wise woman self too. So it's not the case that the maiden returns and then we just kind of go into that, curious, playful, adventurous, very action driven energy, and it's completely disconnected from the experiences that we've had of winter. What you want to feel, what I feel, is really, really helpful and important to connect with this time of year is the integration of crone into maiden. So all that time that we've just spent over the winter months dreaming, receiving inspiration, thinking deeply and carefully about what we want, perhaps in terms of our relationships, in terms of our career, in terms of balance in life, in terms of our health, all of these things that we have really, really dug into those quiet, restful months when we've had the time to think about these things in a more deep way. We want those to be integrated into the maiden, so that just like Persephone returning from the underworld, she's not returning uninformed, she's returning as queen of the underworld. So she's just spent all that time training, learning magic, learning mysteries, being with Hecate. So it's not naive. And when we're looking at healing the archetypes within ourselves, that is part of the maiden that needs to be healed, the part of the maiden that doesn't have that lived experience and that wisdom, and can be naive, can be too innocent, can be led astray. So yeah, integration. I talk about integration a lot in lots of my teachings, but that is really, really important. And what I think is really, really great about today is we have the spring equinox taking place the same day as the dark moon. So we are in the dark moon today. That is a lunar winter. That is underworld. That is liminal space. So think about that. We have this moment. The spring equinox is a moment of balance. It is that little bit of time where we have equal light and dark. And then we step through the threshold. So the way that I'm viewing it this year is tomorrow is that stepping through the portal with the new moon in Aries. So that real sense of integrating all of my winter wisdom today. It's a lot to do today. But really thinking about that and honoring the dark moon by giving yourself that time to retreat away from the world as much as you can, get your journal out, get your oracle cards out, look at your previous journaling entries. So all the things that you've been journaling about over the winter, you want to pass that knowledge on to your maiden self, because once maiden energy gets going, it is easy to get distracted. It's easy to get really stuck into the yang of this time of year, the socializing, the being outward, more expressive, the days being longer, more things to do. It is easy to drop those intentions as we get distracted or pulled in different directions. So that's my advice for today and way to work in ritual to the spring equinox. Think of it as a time to pause. It's a moment of balance, but it's an invitation to really listen to yourself and really get clear on what you want. Because once that yang energy gets going, yeah, like I said, it's easy to get carried away or carried off. So integrate your crone into your maiden. Even have a little conversation between the two parts of yourself. What are you passing on as your crone begins to kind of work a little bit more in the background as we move through spring and summer? So in terms of ways to honor this Wheel of the Year celebrations, I can share with you a couple of things that I've been doing. I've been doing before jumping on to record this podcast. Spring cleaning, it's one of those things that it's so synonymous with this time of year, but it really, really works. So thinking about releasing, clearing out the old, letting go of winter, then this is a great day to cleanse your home and to really get stale energy out. So I've been cleaning. I've got a simmer pot on the stove. So it's filled with rose petals and essential oils, uplifting like lemon and lang ylang. It's got sandalwood in there. I think rosemary too. Then I've got fresh herbs of thyme and rosemary in there as well, just to lift the energy of the house, connect with the energy of flowers, which this time of year is all about. When I finish with my simmer pot, I'm then going to strain it out and I'm going to mop the floors. So I really, really love to do these kind of magical floor washes. I'm so grateful for Kimberly Moore and Marissa McCall, who shared this practice with me. So from Mother House of the Goddess, and they're my dearest friends as well. But they shared this practice with us in priestess training, and it's just stayed with me ever since. I do it at every Wheel of the Year now. So it's not so much for cleaning, that is a side effect of mopping, but it's thinking of energetically cleansing. And so I'll use that essential oil, flower infused, herb infused water to then wash my floors. I'm also going to use it to wash down the door frames and the window frames. So thinking of those thresholds of your home, the boundaries of your home. So thinking about that. So I'll be doing that a little bit later. I've got incense burning, and this is my favorite incense from Ravenwood, called White Magic. It's really powerful. I think it's mainly sandalwood based, but it is just glorious. It fills the whole house. And then I'm going to begin to bring in my seasonal decorations for this time of year. So I've got a beautiful spring wreath with eggs and flowers and blossoms, got some things to decorate the hearth with, and then lighting new white candles, as always, to invite that positive energy into the home. Goddesses of spring are lovely to work with at this time of year. So you can think about Persephone as Kore, for example. You can think about the goddess Ostara, who is celebrated at this time of year. So Ostara is believed to be an Anglo-Saxon goddess who was celebrated in April, and the month April is named after her. We have another goddess associated with March in terms of Anglo-Saxon celebrations. So I'm just looking at my notes because I want to make sure that, well, I'm at least attempting to say it right. So March in Anglo-Saxon times was called Hred Monath, so named after the goddess Thretha, also known as Rheda. So that is spelled Hretha, which I'm really struggling to say. And then Rheda is Rheda. So I would feel that because the equinox takes place in March, it's really nice to bring in this goddess too, because she was in terms of the recordings at this time of year, she was honored with like a lot of offerings, a lot of prayers, lots of rituals around her, really asking for a bountiful year. So Hretha or Rheda, and then Ostara, if you're looking at Anglo-Saxon practices. We've got what other spring goddesses could we do? So Eos, Greek Eos, the goddess of the dawn. She is beautiful to connect with at this time of year. Blodweth, the Welsh goddess of spring, another really powerful maiden goddess. Guinevere, really beautiful energy to connect with, and the Fae. So I'm trying to think if there's anybody else who I can think of the top of my head. But yeah, you're looking at those kind of maiden goddesses associated with flowers. Flora is another one. Have a look at, there's a couple of books. So if you look at your goddess year, that's a really beautiful book. It gives you basically goddesses each month to connect with. And also, I'm trying to look on my shelf. Yeah, You Are a Goddess by Sophie Bashford. It doesn't necessarily give you seasonal goddesses, but if you're looking to connect with goddesses in general, that is a really beautiful book that I recommend, and really nice meditations in there that you might choose one to do today. And then also in that book, The Magical Year that I mentioned, she gives goddesses to connect with. I think Blodweth is in there for the spring equinox. All right, let's briefly talk about the new moon in Aries before I finish this episode. And let me just have a little slurp of my magic tarot tea. How gloriously magical is that? So magic tarot tea, those of you in the UK, this is by Tarn and Moon, who is a good friend of mine, and I used to stock all her teas when I had my yoga studio. And this was the bestseller. So it's blue because of the blue pea flower, but it's also lemongrass and mugwort, amongst other things that I can't remember them all off the top of my head, but it tastes delicious and the color is glorious. And if you squeeze a little bit of lemon into it, it turns purple as well. So yeah, new moon in Aries, as I've talked about, is astrological new year. So Aries is great for really coming back to yourself. It is rooted in self. It's very much those questions that I read out from the Wild Wisdom Companion. So who am I? What do I want? Where am I going? What do I need? It's a really healthy selfishness, if that makes sense. So there can be a shadow side of Aries where it can be too involved or self-centered. But I actually am reframing the term self-centered, because I actually really like the idea of being centered in self. So I know that there can be a shadow side of that, where we are not aware of what is going on around us, and perhaps not caring enough about others, or perhaps actions that are harming others. But the really empowered sense of Aries is that self-centeredness, that ability to be seated in our center, our truth, our power. When we had our call last night for the facilitator training that I'm running at the moment for women's circles, one of my students used the word authority, and I thought that is brilliant. Like, that's such a powerful word for Aries. I like the word sovereignty at this time of year too. So power, truth, core values. It's fire element, and it's cardinal fire. So I want you to think about that too. Where do you need cardinal fire in your life right now? So thinking of fire starter, getting things going, that kind of kick up the bum a little bit, that some of us might feel that we need after dreaming in the Pisces waters for the last month. So where do we need cardinal fire? Where do we need maiden energy? Aries is ruled by Mars, which is the planet of our passions, our desires, and it's often also associated with the warrior. But thinking of defending yourself, your desires, your truth, your dreams. So stepping into that power, stepping forward. It's also really a time to be seen as well, not just Aries, but spring in general. So it's a time to start putting those actions, those wishes into action. So your intentions over winter, now is the time to actually start acting upon them. Use that cardinal fire, use that maiden energy, use that willpower of Aries, and really be bold, be brave as you step forward and out into the world. So, as I said, today is the dark moon, spring equinox. So give yourself some time out to really honor this beautiful transition. And then tomorrow, with the new moon in Aries, we're stepping through that portal, that threshold, into the yang, into the action, into the solar. And what is really interesting about this year is we have 2 new moon in Aries back to back. So our next new moon next month is also a new moon in Aries. So we've got plenty of time to get stuck into the Aries energy and its qualities, and really getting stuff moving. Next month is a little bit funky energy wise, because as well as the double new moon in Aries, we've also got eclipse season starting. So the next new moon in Aries is actually a solar eclipse, followed by a full moon lunar eclipse. And we're also going to be moving into Mercury retrograde as well. And I think Pluto retrograde is not that far afterwards. So I will be talking about that in these podcast episodes, but just to be aware that April is a little bit intense. So I will be talking about how we can work with that energy and protect ourselves, boundaries, thinking about working with practices to call our energy back, defend our living environments from any weird energy. So I think that is all that I wanted to share with you today. I really hope it's been helpful. It's been inspiring. It is my intention to create a little free offering for the spring equinox, a guided meditation for you, which will be available via my YouTube channel. So I will get that up as soon as I can, and then you can have that to practice at any time this week. All right, wishing you a beautiful spring equinox and a really blessed new moon tomorrow, and I'll see you all soon. Thanks so much for watching and or listening. Okay, take care, everyone.